Game of Thrones was one of my absolute favorite television shows and a pop culture phenomenon unlike anything we had ever seen before. But the end of the series was one that is still divisive to this day. When Daenerys attacked King's Landing, many people were horrified by her actions, but those who saw fault in the narrative choice missed something very important throughout the series. Daenerys was always the ultimate villain of this story. And one can almost excuse viewers for missing that fact because the writers made a decision that confused the issue thoroughly, in my opinion, and that was the introduction of this guy. But keep in mind, the Night King doesn't exist in George R.R. Martin's books. Dan and Dave added him to the series simply to give the White Walkers a history with an established hierarchy. But because the Night King does exist in the TV series, presenting a dire threat to all of Westeros, I might add, a lot of people labeled him understandably the big bad, so people simply didn't pay attention to Daenerys' otherwise obviously descending character arc. The writers spent years taking a scared refugee and turning her into a queen on the surface, but if you paid close attention to the small writing, you would have realized that Daenerys was threatening to melt castles and burn cities since season 2, when she stood in the desert with her small khalasar outside the gates of Clarke. She went on to kill the so-called masters everywhere she went, and yes, she freed scores of people from slavery, which could be seen as heroic, but she then used those people to build the army she would take with her to Westeros on her mission to reclaim her father's throne. And once she arrived there, she burned all who would oppose her until her nephew finally managed to convince her to help him defeat the Night King at Winterfell, which some will argue should have been the end of the series. But after their victory, Daenerys quickly lost all of the people that would have been able to temper her worst impulses, including Jon, who had completely forsaken her once he learned of his true lineage, setting up the final confrontation between her and Cersei. And when she finally burned King's Landing to the ground, it was always what she was going to do. And in fact, though the last 2 seasons of this show hurt the overall quality of the series in my eyes, I thought it was one of the few things at the end of the story the writers got exactly right. But what do you think?